Hey everybody, welcome to your Velvet Ashes Legacy podcast for the month of August. I'm Denise Beck here with Sarah Hilkeman. Hey Sarah.
Hey Denise, so good to be with you.
Yeah, it's so good to be with you. I realize I have this little thing I do every time that's like a hey Sarah, and it's just the way I introduce you.
I
So
know it's
hey
just the
Sarah.
way it goes, but yes, and I know you, Denise, have had a busy month and busy month coming up with some fun family things.
I'm exhausted. Yes. I'm sitting here in the comfiest clothes I could grab out of my closet because I'm just tired and those make me feel better. We have had a really busy month. I have three of my children are engaged, and two of those weddings are happening back to back. So we just married off a daughter, and we're getting ready to marry off a son.
So
And
fun.
it's so fun. It's so fun. And we're in the midst of doing some fun things with Velvet Ashes, like preparing to launch our first cohort and getting ready to have our team once a year in-person team meeting, which is happening next week, where I get to see you and Danielle in person at my house.
Yeah, so looking forward to that. It's always fun to see how God shapes those conversations and what comes out of them. And yeah, just thinking about the women that are part of the Velvet Ashes community and how to keep serving them.
Oh my goodness, I love it. And we just come with all of our prayed up thoughts and lay them together and see what the Lord's been doing. And each of us, we actually sent out a survey to our community, and hundreds of women responded about what direction they would like to see some things go with Velvet Ashes. And we take all of that into account as we ask the
Yeah.
Lord, what's next?
I was just reading through some of those survey results. So if you are listening to this and you filled that out, thank you. It was
Thank you.
so
Thank you.
interesting to see, what is resonating and what are people longing for, and how can we make just even little changes that meet the needs of women on the field and in all kinds of different stages, whether that is getting ready to go to the field or welcoming new teammates or getting ready to leave the field or, raising TCKs and just all of these different points along the journey of cross-cultural work. And so, yeah, it's so fascinating just to see all of those different thoughts and ideas.
I love it so much. It just gives us such life to sit in this and ask the Lord, what can we do to meet the needs of the community of Velvet Ashes? And it's the most fun. We love it so much.
Yes.
And also, Sarah, this podcast is the most fun because we were laughing before we hopped on, guys. OG Velvet Ashes Legacy podcast days, early days, it was just Sarah and I, and we were digging into all of these biographies, and we were sitting here and we were looking at one of the ones that we're going to reference today. And we just talked so much. There were 2 hours of content.
Yes.
For one
we
of
had
these.
so many stories that we wanted to tell to be able to highlight these different women. So yeah, if you haven't been listening to the podcast from the beginning, originally Denise and I did all the research and read the books and pulled together all of the details to tell the stories of women from the past who had served cross-culturally and we were figuring things out. We were trying things out. And
so many words, all the words we had, they were there. Oh my word.
Yes. And just trying to figure out what's important to tell and what's interesting to tell and just figuring out how do we do this podcast thing.
It's so true. So today is a throwback because it's Sarah and I, the whole podcast. We are talking about the theme for the month of August, which is jealousy. And
super fun.
Super fun. Well, so initially when you hear that word, don't tune us out, guys, because that may not be something you want to dig into because that it does not seem fun. But B, you might not feel like it's something you resonate with, and maybe a lot of people are thinking, well, to be at the point where you go and serve cross-culturally, haven't you dealt with that? Aren't you over that? But what we saw as we were talking about this and realized that a lot of times jealousy is disguised as other things, and that it weasels its way into a lot of areas in our life. And as we sat here, we were thinking, you know what? we have done so many of these legacy stories. And as we look at the disguises that jealousy takes for cross-cultural life, we realized, oh, we see it in some of these legacy stories that we have already talked about. And so tell a little bit about where we want to go today with this.
Yeah, I think like you were saying, Denise, we might not be able to say like, oh, I'm struggling with jealousy, but maybe it's like comparison. I know that is a huge struggle that I have had not only on the field, but in other parts of my life. And it might be, and I feel like cross-cultural life, like there are so many opportunities for comparison, whether it
Yes.
is language ability or ministry success, or why does this person get to live in this kind of house and I'm living in this kind of house? Like there's all of those different opportunities. But yeah, like you said, we looked back at some of these early women that we covered and some of the ways that maybe jealousy was kind of disguised in their life. Like, I want to be preferred, or why does everyone else seem more gifted? Why isn't anyone noticing what I'm doing? Or even like, why has this been withheld from me but given to someone else?
Absolutely.
And, so like maybe jealousy doesn't resonate for you listening, but maybe one of those phrases is like, oh, I have thought that, or I have wrestled with that. Yeah, I just think there's a lot of ways that jealousy can creep in.
So I want to sit with the comparison thing for just a minute, because that is one of the disguises that jealousy takes. And there's this quote by C.S. Lewis that says, "Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next person." And I was just like, oh, that's so true. It steals our joy, right? And so when we are looking at what somebody else has and we're comparing them, and we can't enjoy what we have, it's a thief of it. When we are comparing with our life with somebody else, it automatically indicates that there has to be a winner and a loser, right? There's like, you're winning and I'm losing, or I'm winning and you're losing, and we become insatiable. It drains us of our joy. There's nothing that will fill us up and make us be fine. We're okay. Because even if we got what they had, then it's not the lack of what we have. It's this problem in our heart, right? So we're going to then look at something else, and you can't ever feed the comparison bug enough. You're always going to be looking at somebody else and be dissatisfied. So it's revealing a heart problem. And honestly, it discredits the unique story that God is writing in each of us, right? So it doesn't allow us to hold two things together and be like, these are so different and they're both good. And I do want to say that a lot of these thoughts that are coming out of this comparison is coming out of some study that I've been doing for a cohort that we're doing. And I bring in a lot of some of the work Nicole Zazowski has done on joy and celebration. And because I was preparing for that and this podcast at the same time, a lot of her thoughts were resonating with jealousy and joy, and how it's such a thief of joy. And yeah, oh my goodness. And so I was just sitting and stewing in that and thinking, oh my word, this resonates with me.
Well, and I think it points to a feeling that there's not enough. When it's like, if I am not winning, if I'm not getting the most of this, like that there's not enough to go around of whatever it is, enough, maybe something physical, like enough money, or whatever, but enough like praise, enough room for all of us to be doing well. And that scarcity sort of mindset can rob us of a lot.
Okay, something that I wasn't planning on going here, but it comes to mind is I don't know if it's the man and woman, complementarian, egalitarian, that debate. it's the same thing in my mind as like we tend to pit ourselves as we look at men leading, women leading, as one has to be the winner and one has to be the loser. For women to get a place of a platform, if you will, or the ability to speak, we have to talk badly about men and how they're doing it wrong, or vice versa. If men are in the right position and up high enough, then women have to be down and it has to be low. And there's this like, there has to be a winner or a loser instead of the way that God created us, equally gifted in different ways. But there's not a winner or a loser. We both complement each other well in how God gifted us in different ways. And we're so grateful for that. And so there's like, I don't know, this spills into lots of different areas of our life if we want to keep going about this comparison bug. And I know that like this is a conversation about missions too, men and women and how they serve well. We've talked about it a little bit on the podcast. There can be a jealousy in that as well. There's a lot of stuff going on in that realm as well, which we don't have to get into. But another disguise that jealousy can take on the mission field is when you notice yourself offering a lot of criticism. So that can be a little bit like comparison, but we like to use the word feedback. I'm going to give you some feedback about that. And sometimes that is because we don't want to humble ourselves and admit that there's another issue here that I am upset about. I'm comparing, I'm jealous about. So let me just offer some feedback to put you in your place, to bring you down a little bit, and so that's another way that jealousy can disguise itself and be in our everyday lives, on the mission field, on, in our work with, and on a team. I mean, the team situation is this little pressure cooker of people. And so all of these feelings can come out, and we try to figure out where do we set them? How do we communicate that? And so these are words and thoughts that may be coming up for you on the field that, you can ask yourself, am I jealous about something in that?
Well, and I think it can keep us from celebrating someone else's, success, yes, or their ability, whatever that might be. If we're so focused on, oh, they're doing better than I am, or in comparison to us, or when we like have those feelings of criticism coming up, or our jealousy is disguised that way. The example that came to mind for me was my teammate was really gifted with language, and I was not. And there were all kinds of feelings in my heart, but when I was able to kind of set that aside, we realized that actually we worked really well together language-wise, because her comprehension or her speaking ability was actually a lot better than mine, but my comprehension was a little bit better than hers. And so if I was understanding and she was able to respond, like we could work really well together. But I had to let go of a lot of things because people would hear her speak and praise her. And yes, I wanted that, I wanted that praise.
Okay. One thing that Nicole Zazowski brought out in a Bible study that she wrote recently was this idea that it's easier to mourn with those who mourn than rejoice with those who rejoice, even though we've been asked to do both things. And so when you think about the reality of, you would be interrupted to mourn with somebody who mourned. Like if someone called you up and was having a really rough time or something, you would allow that interruption to prompt an action in you. What can I do for you? How can I be there for you? But how often do we see somebody who's rejoicing and allow that to interrupt our schedule and be like, how can I rejoice well with you? And how do I not let my ability to rejoice with you affect how I feel about myself? And, like the scarcity mindset of there's not enough celebration or joy or accolades to go around. So if I give mine to you, that means I have less for myself. Like, It doesn't make sense, but that tends to be how we feel maybe, or how we respond to it. And I see that in what you're saying. It's like, how can I rejoice with this gift that I don't have, or this blessing that
Right.
didn't come to me, and be okay with it and not let me feel bad about myself because of that, you know?
Well, and I think when we see someone else receiving the thing that we long for, it's like it presses on a wound or a bruise that we have. Like it's not just a matter of, oh, am I choosing to celebrate this other person, but it gets into something that we are specifically longing for. I mean, the thing that just comes to mind so quickly for me is singleness. And, when I have had friends get married, I am so happy for them and so excited for this person that God has brought into their life. And yet there is that like, oh, why her and not me? Just that like, oh, here is this really tender longing in my heart that like this specific answer is pressing on just a little bit. And so it can be really hard to celebrate with people, and to rejoice with those who are rejoicing when it is so directly connected to something in our own life.
Well, and I think that also hits on why people maybe don't, is because they're like, well, I can't be genuine in it. I'm really struggling with this, so I don't want to be fake. I don't want to go and put on a fake smile and be like, oh, I'm so happy for you, when I'm really so sad for myself. But an interesting neuroscience principle is that it's much easier for our feelings to follow actions, the way our brain are wired. If you don't feel something yet, when you start acting a certain way and following and doing the actions, a lot of times your feelings will follow that. But it's very rare that the other way happens, where you wait till you act until you feel it, because that doesn't usually happen, And so it's like, if we know that something is good and we need to be doing it, do it. Do it and see if your actions will follow, because the action is good, and pray that our feelings will follow. Isn't it interesting how God wired our brains that way, to be obedient before we feel it? But so, Sarah, we referenced that this topic stirred in us some things as we laid it across some of these earlier stories. And so we have drawn from a few of our early episodes where we did a lot of the research. And I'm curious, who did you look at differently after sitting with this topic? What did you pull from an earlier story?
Yeah, so one of the women was Elisabeth Elliot, and we covered her in episode 7 of the podcast. And I feel like her story really connects with what we were just talking about. Like, her longing and maybe comparison or jealousy was not so much like, oh, this person is a lot better at this than me. It was more God's provision and maybe the lack of that in her own life. So a lot of us are familiar with Elisabeth Elliot's story. Like, so much of her life is marked by loss. Like, even she talks about her early life on the field before she even got married, and she was investing in Bible translation and doing all of this work. And then so much of it was essentially for nothing. Like, so much of it was lost. And then obviously she lost her husband, Jim, after just a few years of marriage. When you see in a lot of her books, like, Elisabeth was a very passionate person. Like, she had a lot of passion, I guess, in her life, and a lot of longing. And so the fulfillment of that and her marriage was such a gift for her. And yet, she was just married a few years before, in such a heartbreaking way, her husband was killed, as part of the 5 missionaries that were killed in Ecuador. And she experienced this long season of singleness, which is not something I think about when I think about her life.
Me neither, Sarah.
Like, between her first husband dying until she met her second husband, and then she ended up losing her second husband as well. And so there were so many gifts in her life that I think she kind of just tasted briefly, right? That she longed for these things, and it would be easy for her. And, I don't want to put this on her unnecessarily. I think we see it in her writing. But I just imagine that there were so many of these moments of, God, why did you give that to her and not me?
Yeah. Well, and I even, as you're sitting here talking about it, I'm thinking like, why is this my story? Why couldn't I
Right.
have a different story?
And how often do we say, and I have said this, God, I have given everything for you. I have sacrificed time being close to family. I have sacrificed a life that doesn't involve parasites and, like all of those types of things. Like I have been willing to deal with all of these hard things in order to serve you. So why is this my story? Why am I struggling with this? Like, why are you not giving this to me? And, I think that is maybe just an opportunity to like look in our heart and our expectations of, like the reward perhaps, or the story that we think God is going to write based on our sacrifices. But yeah, I think those questions of like, why does this person get healthy children when my children are not healthy? Or
why do their children not question Jesus and mine do?
yeah, right.
Why?
Yeah, why does she get to stay on the field and I have to leave? Or even there were times when I was on the field when it was like, why do they get to leave and I have to stay?
Yes, that's what I was thinking actually. Yeah. Why did they get asked to speak? Why do they have no problem fundraising and I can't seem to get anyone to give to this project? It's like all of these different things. Sarah, the little verse story that's coming to my mind is in John when Jesus is talking to Peter and he's explaining to him like what's going to happen to him. And Peter, his initial response isn't, okay. It's, well, what about John? What about John? What's going to happen to him? And Jesus is like, if it's my will that he remains until I come, what's that to you? You follow me. Do what I'm asking of you. And I'm just like, if that isn't the antidote to jealousy verse of what is it to you if she doesn't lose her husband, if her kids follow Jesus, if she is great at language and great at fundraising, what is it to you? You follow me. This is how I made you. This is what I'm asking of you. This is the story I'm writing for you. And I was just like, oh, Jesus understood that we were going to wrestle with that. And it's not new. So what I'm also thinking is I think we have it a little more difficult because, well, okay, I am verbally processing without much thought going into this, but Instagram and social media feels like it is asking us to compare every detail of our life on 90-second loops throughout our entire day, right? And so it is like, it creates an insatiable desire to want and to need and to think that what I have isn't enough over and over and over, right? So we can fall into the trap of thinking, oh, this is a new thing because of what we are exposed to all the time. But Elisabeth Elliot wouldn't have had that, and she still struggled with jealousy. Peter wouldn't have had that, and he still struggled with jealousy. This is from the garden problem where Eve was tempted to be jealous of something she didn't have and was told she should. So like this is an age-old thing that we get tricked into being tempted by in different ways, but the root problem has been as old as creation, for real.
Yeah, very true. Denise, did you have a woman that resonated with something?
So something I love the story of Helen Roseveare.
Me too.
I loved studying her. I loved doing that podcast. And there's so many different wonderful things about her story. Again, I encourage you. What episode was she, Sarah?
She was episode 5. Yeah, it's still one of my favorite episodes of all time.
Yes. I loved that episode. And she was a missionary doctor. She was in the Congo. She built hospitals. She trained nurses. She discipled students. She was like the dream that, as little girls, like what we think of, like I want to go and make a huge difference. And she did that. And then there's the whole story of the big rebellion that happened. And I won't spoil the details, but there's some amazing testimony that comes out of her being captured. And um, she had all of these things in her life and her story that were something to be proud of, were something that she could talk about and have reason to think God did a good work here. But what I think I saw jealousy hidden in her story had to be toward the end of her story, when she ended up going back to the field after the rebellion, and things had changed. She wasn't the same person, obviously, who would be after you went through the tragedy that she went through. But the people that she had worked with had changed. The Congo had changed politically. The church she was at had changed. The mission had changed. National leaders were coming up and taking roles. They were being trained well. They were becoming the doctors. They were stepping into positions of responsibility. New global workers had arrived and were doing things differently. The planning wasn't all dependent on her. She wasn't the pillar. She wasn't she was a pioneer, but she wasn't the one that everything revolved around anymore. And I don't think she knew quite what to do with that. It was hard for her to step into and put on a role that didn't fit anymore because people were different. And she really wrestled with that. She wrestled with thinking she was a failure when she finally ended up leaving the field, because it wasn't like this clean, easy exit. It wasn't like, check, I did that. It was, I don't know if I like how it feels to hand all of this off to somebody else. I don't know if I like the direction they're going with it. I don't know what that says about me, because I maybe shouldn't feel this way, but I do. I don't know who I am if I'm not this person doing this thing in the way that I want to do it. And so she later admitted when she left Africa that she was heartbroken. She was wondering, was it worth it? I mean, it blows my mind to know her story and that she was asking, was it all worth it? And she didn't leave with this big triumph of fanfare and this big welcome back. She had a lot of unanswered questions. She was disappointed. And, like to be on this side of it. I mean, I can imagine her in the midst of it feeling so disoriented. To be on this side of it, we know that there was a huge ministry after the fact of her speaking and her traveling and her encouraging that happened. But in the midst of it, I think she was really dealing with some jealousy and some comparison of what was going on. And it reminded me of the story of Moses and Joshua, because Moses had done all of the work with the people and he wanted to be the one that took them over into the promised land. But we all know the story of why he couldn't. But he's pleading with the Lord to be like, can you just let me? Can you let me? Can you let me? Can you please? Can you let me? And God's like, go up on this mountain and I'll let you look at it. But here's really what I want you to do is I want you to train Joshua. I want you to encourage Joshua. I want you to rejoice and celebrate and accelerate his joy, because he's going to get to do what you want to do. And I'm telling you, no. And we read that story and, you just think about it. Of course, you are training your replacement, but the feelings associated with that, can you even imagine being told by the Lord, no, I'm not going to gift you in that way. And in fact, I want you to encourage the person who will get to do what you can't do. I want you to prepare them well. I want you to celebrate them and to accelerate their joy as they get to do what you can't do. How hard would that have been, to sit in that situation? And I think about that for Helen, to be said, you can't be the person that takes this ministry to the next level. In fact, you're going to have to exit out and be okay with what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I think about our people in our community who are in seasons of transition, who are in
Right.
seasons of the new guard is coming. The younger global workers are entering the field. They've got different ideas. It clashes with some of the things that were part of my story. And I wouldn't do it that way. And I probably couldn't do it that way. The Lord didn't ask that of me. In fact, my story prevented me from doing that way. But I'm tempted to compare and critique because they don't have my story and they maybe could do it a different way. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's jealousy. That's the
Right.
hidden forms of jealousy that are in Helen Roseveare's story that I see resonate in other stories, in my story, and where we were on the field. In fact, I see it more from my story. If we're sharing, how did we
Mm-hmm.
interact with this, was
Right.
when we were entering the field, we were entering into an established group of people who had tens, like decades of
Mm-hmm.
ministry and work. And we were coming in with new ideas, new thoughts, lots of momentum. And we were met with the oh sure, yeah, try it that way. And then don't ask us for help when you fail. And granted, we were probably full of all sorts of gusto that was not considering all of the work that had gone on before us and thinking we could do what you couldn't do. Like there was probably some pride in how we entered, and that was so unkind. But we also were recipients of the changing of the guard that was hard for people that were going to be exiting the field to watch something different happen. And it's painful on both sides. It really is.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I don't know. That's where I sat and looked at Helen's story differently of like, oh, this was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not immune from jealousy, even if we are great heroes of the faith.
Yeah. That is such a good point, Denise, of those kind of transition moments where it's not necessarily that we're like, oh, I wish they were not gifted in this way, that this is something that they are taking on and doing really well in, but it can, like, it just makes us look at our own lives and like, oh, does that mean that what I was doing was a failure? Does that mean that because I'm not gifted in the same way that, I am lacking? And yeah, it can be very vulnerable to either pass something off or to, yeah, just in those moments of transition, it
Yeah.
can feel very vulnerable.
Boy, those areas of transition, which so much of our lives in cross-cultural work are full of transitions, but they are such strippers away of anything that we have used to cover up or to smooth over the edges. If there's anything still in there, it pops right to the surface, right? It's so much easier to see in those
Mm-hmm.
hard times. Sarah, who else did you look at that and think, I see some stuff?
Yeah, yeah. So the other one that I was thinking about was Isabel Kuhn, and she was one of the early ones that we ended up doing 2 episodes on. We called it just episode 2, but it's in 2 parts, and because we had a lot of words
So
about
many.
her story, which is great. She's a fascinating person, and one of the things that was so interesting was she was really very gifted and like a very fun person. She loved dancing, and as she was growing up, and then when the Lord really got a hold of her heart and she started down this path of getting ready to serve cross-culturally, she sort of looked around. I mean, it's a lot of what we've been talking about, but she looked around at these people who were around her, and, some were really amazing Bible teachers, and some were like super outgoing or deeply spiritual. And, even when she first applied to serve cross culturally, she was turned down, and it ended up,
Mm,
the Lord used that. But we definitely see in her story her kind of saying like, everyone else has something that I don't, or why don't I have these gifts that it feels like so many other people have? And yeah, I just think that's such a natural temptation for us to go back to that comparison thing and be like, oh, this woman is so outgoing, or this person is so good at building relationships, and language is such a easy place to compare
yes.
ourselves to other people. um you know this person is writing books and that's what I always wanted to do. Or yeah, just like we're measuring ourselves compared to other people. And one thing that's so interesting about Isabel's life, she was so faithful with her husband to just invest in people groups in China and then eventually in Thailand. But she ended up getting cancer and she died at the age of 55, like really so young. And
yeah,
in the midst of really immense suffering, when I'm sure so many of us would be like, Lord, why? Why is this happening to me? But it was in that time that she wrote so many of her books, which are so beautiful and have inspired so many people. And so, yeah, I think comparison can keep us from seeing the unique assignment that God has for us. And, you know, like if she would have just stayed in her, like, why is this happening to me? And I'm sure she thought those things, but it didn't keep her from saying, oh, in this moment, I have the opportunity to do something else. I have the opportunity to tell my story and to share the ways. And like, I think we see that in these women that we've talked about. They were honest about their struggles, and they shared that honesty through writing, which is such a gift to us.
We were discussing before we came on that for some reason we had the most words about Isabel, and I have the most trouble remembering her story. And so I need to go back and listen to it. But one of the things that keeps coming to mind as you were saying this, and I'm hoping I remember it correctly, is just how gifted she was with words. Like she was so descriptive and how she communicated things in a time when we were like so grateful for the words of women, people that had the words to put it down, because we see the world a little differently. The way God wired us to look at the work that he gave us, and to have these words of people like Elisabeth Elliot, of people like Isabel Kuhn, you know, to be able to enter into their experience and be inspired by the way they looked at the world, the way they looked at the work, is such a gift. And I just feel like I remember like her describing daily life and what it was like in the home. And
well, and I feel like, again, maybe I'm making this up, but I feel like there was kind of some tension between her and her husband of like who was writing the newsletters and kind of that like who is better at it and that kind of thing. And so even, you know, it can come into a marriage relationship. It can come into family dynamics, even. Yeah, that comparison.
Absolutely. Well, the next one, the final one we wanted to get a glimpse into with this different lens of, you know, jealousy was Amy Carmichael. And another really popular name that you probably have heard a little bit of her story if you are someone listening to this podcast. But she spent 55 years in India. She's known because she rescued hundreds of girls from temple prostitution. She never married. She never took a furlough. I didn't realize that until I was like going back her entire life. When she said goodbye to her family, she said goodbye. She never saw them again. And so, you know, when you think about sacrifice, and this girl understood what she was doing, and she didn't go over there with this like, this is what I'm set out to do. It was saying yes to what God brought to her, that when you turn around, it shaped this entire ministry that she could have never guessed, you know.
Sure.
But what I appreciate about Amy and this topic specifically of jealousy comes out of a booklet that she wrote called If. It's one of her shortest works, but it's real revealing. Actually, it wasn't written to be something that was widely published. It was more of something she wrote for the Donover Fellowship in India. What she did, it wasn't for publication. She just wanted it to kind of dig into her heart. She's questioning, is what we claim really shaping who we are? Are we just giving lip service, but it's not really changing who we are? And so there's a lot of statements that begin with the word if. If I cannot honestly say, thy will be done when another is preferred before me, then I know nothing of Calvary and love. She's getting at is there jealousy in my heart in this entire publication about if I crave human approval, I know nothing of Calvary love. If I can easily discuss the shortcomings and failures of another, then I know nothing of Calvary love. What she is naming in this is, if there is jealousy stirring in my heart and it's exhibiting itself in my love, in my life, in my ministry, there's something off. And I need to bring that to the foot of Calvary, to the cross, to have it examined. So I feel like we go back to the beginning of this podcast and be like, when we say jealousy and it doesn't really resonate with you, what we're seeing from these women who were pillars of women serving cross-culturally, they understood this is something that weasels its way into our heart, into our ministry. It's so deceitful, and it disguises itself in ways that are so destructive to who we are, to what we believe about ourselves, to how we treat people on our teams, and to our growth in our relationship with God and to how we see him. And at the end of her ministry, she's recognizing this is such an issue. I need to dig into this. And so this is her personal digging into, how do I weed this out of my life? How does it exhibit itself in me? How do I see it exhibiting itself in my team? How can I call it what it is so we can get it out of there? And that's where I feel like this topic is so important.
Yeah.
How can we give tools, give words to things that might reveal where jealousy is hiding itself, and we're calling it something super spiritual? We're allowing it to exist because we're renaming it. We're making it look like it's super righteous. We are giving it a home in our heart, in our ministry, in our teams. And it is destructive, and it is robbing us of joy. And it is not allowing us to see who God wants us to be and for him to work in our life. So that's where I feel like these women, we can go back and stand on their shoulders and be like, you saw this, you did things to work. What we didn't want to do, Sarah, we actually said this, was we don't want to sit here and lay all of this out and be like, it's a problem. Sorry, have fun with it. Once you recognize it, we don't know what to do with it. Because that's not helpful. And so even as you listen to this podcast, I wonder what the Lord stirs in you. I'm like, okay, yeah, I recognize this. How do I counteract that in my life? What do I do now? And for me, the thing that really resonated was, I think what I would take away is the celebrate other people well. I feel like that was something I can put an action step to. I can begin to ask the Lord, help me recognize how I can celebrate somebody well. And if I don't feel it, help me to know the steps that I can take to act before I feel it. I wonder, like, Sarah, what comes to mind of like actions that could look like?
Yeah, that's good. I think, first we have to pay attention to what can I celebrate in someone else? What am I thankful for that they are doing? How can I say that out loud? I think, one thing that I hope people get as we have talked about these women from, the history of cross-cultural workers, just know that you're not alone. I think maybe if we start to recognize these things in our heart, like shame can cause us to hide and to be like, oh my goodness, I'm such a terrible global worker or whatever. And so just know, like, you're not alone in this. So push out and look up and pay attention. What are those things that a teammate is super gifted at, and let her know or let him know that. And not in a way of like, oh, I wish I was like you, or with some criticism attached to it or that type of thing, but just a little thing of noticing.
And when you do, like, I'm thinking a text, that's so easy, right?
Yeah.
You send a text.
Right.
And try to have zero strings attached. If all you get is a thumbs up, that's okay. You weren't doing it so that you would be then getting accolades back. Oh, you're so kind. You're so, what a gift this was for me today. I really needed it. Like, yeah, those would be great responses. But if all you get is a thumbs up, that's not why you were doing it. And so like you are training your heart in that. I think of noticing not just when they do something well, but when they do something that's hard for them. I know that was a really hard thing for you to do. And I want you to know that I saw that, and so like, that's another way you can celebrate with them. And then even just that idea of allow rejoicing with someone to interrupt your schedule as much as you would allow mourning with someone to interrupt your schedule. You get wind of something wonderful that happened and you put something down and you're like, I'm going to get over there and I want to see your eyeballs and I want to just tell you how proud I am of you. I'm going to come over to your door and see it for myself, just like I would come and sit with you if you just got the worst news in the world. How could we let rejoicing interrupt our schedule to accelerate the joy of other people as well?
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I think too, just noticing God's faithfulness in our own story without it being in comparison to God's faithfulness in someone else's story, just anchoring ourselves in those moments when God brought us through something hard, or when something maybe that we didn't recognize as a gift turned out to be a gift. And it's okay to hold more than one thing. I'm holding my hands up for those who aren't just listening, obviously. And of that, like, there is this thing that I long for, and God is so faithful. Like, it can be both of those things. And I think that heart work can also help us just celebrate God's faithfulness in our own lives. And then my hope would be that would help us to be able to celebrate God's faithfulness in other people's lives too, without it taking away from what he's doing in our own story.
Another thought that comes to my mind as we're wrapping up here is something that is hard for people in this line of work is you don't want to come across as prideful, right? Like we always like, oh, I don't want to talk too well of myself. But there is something when we acknowledge with the Lord, thank you for making this my story. Thank you for what you have given me. Lord, you are uniquely creating the story in my life. Help me to be thankful for it. And like having that that real open dialogue with the Lord where we can recognize we are unique and there are good things about that. Help me see the good things in my story. Lord, help me don't just realize the hard things that you're giving me. Help me to recognize them as you uniquely writing my story and rejoice with you about that. You have made me different. You have made me great at things and not great at things. And this is a unique thing to celebrate. And so, that's not bad. That's not wrong. That's not, being sinfully prideful when we celebrate with the Lord, how he is uniquely crafting our stories. So such an interesting topic to get into. I'm super hopeful that in our membership community that spurns a lot of deeper conversations and thoughts about how you're interacting. Where do you see jealousy being disguised in yourself, in your team, in your ministry, in your work? What are prompts you might come up with to actively combat this in your life and to bring you more joy? Yes. So as always, we thank Barnabas International for being a sponsor of this podcast to allow us to sit here with you and ponder these topics. We hope it brings clarity and joy and, I don't know, action steps in your life and in your ministry. Sarah, thanks for sitting here with me. Fun to go back to an OG. Let's do the whole episode together.
Yes, I love it.
We hope you were blessed by this episode, and we look forward to joining with you again next month on your Velvet Ashes Legacy podcast. See you later.
Every voice part of the symphony.